You know, when you talk about despair, you sound instantly intelligent. Sorry.
Your camera's gone off, Guillermo.
I know.
Hello, everybody. I am Neil Gaiman, and I have the absolute honor and delight and pleasure to be here virtually with my old friend, Guillermo del Toro.
How are you, my friend? We seldom are in the same place, you and I, and welcome this.
So we're here today to talk about some of our favorite films that inspire hope for us. And the reason we're doing it is because COVID-19 has shown us all how incredibly interconnected we are. And we're also here under the aegis of UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, because people fleeing war, having to leave their homes, having to leave their cities and go somewhere else, they are even more vulnerable than they have ever been before. And the refugees that I've met, they are people who inspire hope. And I thought it would be great just to talk about films that give us hope. What was the first film that gives you hope?
One of the movies that pops to mind immediately for me in this sense is Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Because evidently we're talking about systemic adversity, which is prison. It is not only a place, but is a routine, a circumstance that is made to be unbreakable, right? And I think it's a good movie to talk about or to think about because in this case, for most of the movie, the main character remains in prison, right? It's only at the end that he manages to escape. Spoilers ahead. But the beauty of that is that his hope is a type of hope that is rare and gorgeous and beautiful and inspiring, which is intimate. He does not much share it with everyone. He's not he doesn't proselytize about it. He doesn't scream it. There's a great moment in which he plays a small opera, a portion of an opera, and the whole patio is liberated, and the camera sweeps and swoons with this music and flies above the prison walls. And it's a moment of pure cinema, but it's also a moment in which the camera very deliberately transcends the point of view from the floor. You know, it just flies like the spirit.
I tell you, those voices soared higher and farther than anybody in a great place dares to dream.
I find that it came to mind because constantly that hope is tested. You know, that essential core of this character gets tested. And it was true in the book also. I remember reading the book when it came out, different seasons. And it was, in a way, a lot of people said, oh, this is so different from Stephen King. I said, I don't think it is.
I remember Steve once telling me that he was in a supermarket and a little old lady came up and told him off. She's like, you're Stephen King. You make all those scary, awful films. You should make something nice, like that nice Shawshank Redemption film. And I love that. I love that he got told off. And I love that that was what they used to tell him off, because that's also Steve. He always is a writer about hope. I think
he is.
Hope is so key to everything he's done.
Most every character or hope is dangled above them, or is either unreachable or is reachable, but is always dangled above them. It can be the main character in Christine, it can be the kids in Stand By Me, but it's always there in some form. And I think with Shawshank, Shawshank has characteristics that are interesting for me because it's the distillation of every prison movie ever made. You know, in many ways, you get the cliches and they are reenacted in a new way, in a human way, and they crack out of their shell. You know, they are made whole again, which is the virtue of the singer singing the song. It doesn't matter if it's been sung before. is that he or she renews the song. He makes it whole again, and the words have a different meaning. And this movie is it touches every single form and point of a prison movie, and then takes them further, you know, because it doesn't stay there. It takes them further. And I think I always find at the core of films about hope, almost always there's a core of friendship or of human relationships. You know, in this case, the friendship with Morgan Freeman's character, Red, which is essential,
Mm-hmm.
and which whom without he may not have made it, not only because of the circumstance of the hammer or the material things, but because he falls basically in love with humanity, embodied by the person next to him.
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
And I think if you can think of other movies, Umberto D, you know, The Friendship with the Little Dog. If you can think of Nights of Cabiria, many of the movies that come to mind to me when I think about hope is human friendship. And you know, if people believe that hell is others, so is heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is something, it's so easy. I think people make all kinds of pretexts not to turn the switch on. They can say all the reasons why they want to turn the switch on, but it is a switch.
I love that. My first movie of hope is all about friendship too. And it's Tempopo by Juzo Itami.
よーし、それじゃあ今日からこの店を町一番のラーメン屋に作り変える大作戦を開始するぞ。
It's about making noodles. It's about making good noodles. It's about how we as human beings relate to food, how we bond over food, how food becomes a story for us. And the action of eating together is something that makes us more than just individuals on desert islands.
Food is storytelling. When you come to my house, which you have, and you eat a dish, a Mexican dish that you have never tried, you understand a lot of my story already immediately. There is no more beautiful thing than to feed the other.
And there's a moment in it where the person who is very obviously the bad guy stops being the bad guy,
Which happened.
and which is just wonderful. It's one of the very few films that I can think of where, you know, there's a line that Richard Curtis once said to me about films. He said, somebody changing their minds is more powerful than a thrown punch. And what's wonderful about Itami's movie is there are all of these thrown punches in there, but every time somebody changes their mind about something, or somebody learns something, or somebody uses their brain, the film just comes to life and lights up like magic.
ラーメンというものは面白いもので、いい仕事をすればそれは必ずいい味になって帰ってきます。
I'm gonna move one up. I have this a little further down the list, but I'm gonna move it up because it's a corollary to what you just said, and that's Babette's Feast.
Och vad känns som tidens största kulinariska geni?
We exist, I believe, always permanently in two planes, no matter who you are and no matter what your circumstances, you exist in two planes, the real and the symbolic. And the symbolic has the power to transcend the real as a cipher and a symbol to others. And Babette's Feast says salvation lies without, meaning the things that will most enrich you are the things that you don't do for you, that you do for others.
Jeg vil alleen leve fest med dagen på præstens fødselsdag.
Babette's Feast is this beautiful closed universe, like prison. It's a closed universe of mores and morals and rigidity, and in comes this nugget, this drop of water that ripples the whole community. It reminds me of other of Isaac Dinson's stories where these things ripple out, and through food she gives everybody hope and the desire to live.
Stjernerne kommer nærmere.
Måske kommer de nærmere hver nat.
I love that you're talking about existing on a symbolic plane as well as a real plane, and how the symbolism is as important, because the next film that I'd chosen, and it is a hopeful film, despite the fact it's also one of the darkest films I know, is Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
Of course it is, yes.
It's a film about a man who has dreams and lives on a symbolic level and is in a 1984-like world, much like the one we're in, and has to rebel against the system.
We did it! We broke right through the... We did it! Woo, 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 woo.
And it's about his symbolic triumph over the forces that would destroy him.
Mm-hmm.
And about the idea that our dreams at the end are what give us power. They're, again, spoiling the ending very slightly, Michael Palin's lovely, sweet, neighborly family man torturer is out to break Jonathan Pryce, our hero.
A decent fellow, Michael.
A very decent fellow. And you understand him, and he's only doing his job. And that Pryce evades and survives, and how he does it is, for me, the key to humanity. It's about not giving up. It's about holding to your dreams, and it's about not letting the forces that would break you. And there's so much hope in there and so much inspiration in that film.
I agree with you. And it's so funny. We live now in a moment of decent monsters, in which monsters and monstrous concepts can be shopped around in the name of a decency that surpasses the right to be human, I find.
Mm-hmm.
And this fellow, this nice torturer, as you call him, the difference, the beauty is that he is with the system, and that makes it immediately, at a symbolical level, be against life and individuality and the possibility of individuality. No matter which concept makes you fall on the side of rigidity. I remember the Tao says rigidity is the nature of death, and flexibility is the nature of life. That which is rigid will break. That which is supple will bend but never break. And I think what is beautiful about this is the spirit. They get Jonathan Pryce, they get him brainwashed. But the final shot, when the camera is pulling out, and you hear Brazil in the most beautiful orchestration, and the place is replaced by the clouds. I saw that movie. If I may talk about your movie for a second, I saw that movie alone in a multiplex in Texas, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it changed my life. It's one of the 10 or 12 movies that have simply made me a different person. And I thought, this embodies what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this absolutely horrible struggle that is being yourself, which is our daily problem. Every day we struggle to exist.
Well, I suppose we're all human.
And that, I think, leads me to my next movie, which is curious. It's a curious choice, perhaps. It's Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. Now, Capra has been the victim of a lot of misconceptions. They used to call his movies Capricorn, right? Because they were corny. But the fact is that he is one of the darkest filmmakers too. In order to get to a place of hope, he drags you into an absolute nightmare world. And it tells you that the essence of the human spirit, which is something I completely believe, is choice. And you have a man that has been imprisoned, not physically like in Shawshank, but has been imprisoned by his choices. James Stewart, he has chosen at every turn, family, work, all these choices of the common man, the man that seeks to belong in a community, and he feels completely suffocated by them. And the movie then shows him what the world would be if he had not lived, and we catch him at the moment where he's contemplating killing himself, and we catch him at the moment where he decides to live again. The level of nightmare that Capra creates, the oppression of that alternate world, is absolutely essential for our discussion, because we all feel small. We all feel like we cannot do enough. And, it's not, it's a sophism. It's a fallacy at the end of the day.
It is all about interconnection, that film. It says that you cannot take one person out, that we aren't islands. We think we're individuals, and actually we have us simply by being there, simply by trying to do good things, simply by trying to make the world a little bit better. We are having effects that we cannot imagine.
Each man's life touches so many other lives.
So I love that you picked It's a Wonderful Life. I feel this is kind of like, there's a ping pong quality to this I wasn't expecting, and a feeling that what I'm giving you and you're giving me, and then I give you something back. Because my next film is the hope in it is one of the most hopeful films I know, but the hope is all meta. And it's All That Jazz, Bob Fosse's film. It's about a guy he's a director, he's making a Broadway show, he's cutting his film together, he's putting together a new show, he's overworking, he has a heart attack, and then a long musical sequence, and then he dies. I've given away the plot.
He didn't know where the games ended and the reality began.
And you go, where's the hope? And for me, I look at that film as one of the most inspiring and hopeful films ever, because that was Bob Fosse's life. And he had the heart attack, but it wasn't fatal. He survived, and he took that and he made art. And he took his experience. He took everything in that film as part of Fosse's life, just slightly changed just enough so that nobody's going to sue him about it. So the Lenny Bruce film he's making becomes a film about another comedian. Chicago becomes a slightly different musical.
At least 3 people said how much they liked the screening.
It's a film about surviving and taking the things that have completely messed up your life, the things you've done to mess up your own life, the things that hurt you, the things that could have killed you. And then the hope and inspiration for me comes because he took all that and he made art and he made something magical. And I look at that film and it always gives me hope and it always inspires me.
I agree with that, because that's a movie, look, it's sort of a completely wild, enormously accelerating variation of 8.5 in many ways. But what it does that is fantastic to me is that it tells you every flaw of the central character and exposes them, and still he tells you life was worth living.
It's showtime, folks.
My final movie, weirdly, I think of in the same kind of way, because it's Jean Cocteau's Belle Bête, Beauty and the Beast. This magical fairy tale film. I look at how it was made and the circumstances in which it was made. Post-war in France, they have no money. And yet Cocteau can look at things like hanging sheets on a line and create beauty.
Alors, cette bête n'était pas une bête féroce?
Non, Ludovic. C'est une bonne bête.
And in everything he does, there's a triumph of the filmmaker's intelligence, a triumph of ideas over obstacles, a willingness to create magic in the face of adversity. And that he made something that I think is one of the triumphant films of the 20th century, probably the greatest fairy tale film. Pan's Labyrinth too, but it is, I mean it, but it is really, Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast is so special and so remarkable. And that he made it gives me hope and inspires me and shows that people working together can take incredibly limited resources and use them to create something bigger than themselves, something huge and something that lasts.
De pareils prodiges sont-ils possibles?
Nous en sommes la preuve.
Perhaps pertinent to our discussion is that all movies, good ones, bad ones, Sunday ones, deep ones, art house, are hope. Mm-hmm. Because art is hope, and if we eliminate the possibility of communicating like that, we lose hope. What movie gives you hope, no matter what the day is, what it embodies, and whether it's a studio movie or an independent, which movie embodies cinema in many ways for me is The Wizard of Oz. You know, it's a movie that it's about a road and the similar people being in it with completely different goals, going to a place of hope, and then the hope says to them, I'm counterfeit.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
But guess what? The journey, that road, and each other, fulfill that every wish you had. And I always think is an incredibly deep movie. I always think it has what best fairy tales have, which is poignancy and beauty. You know, and what it does is it does it at a grand scale. I would agree with you on Beauty and the Beast 100%. It's one of my top 3 movies of all times. And this, I think, is very different, but I like most Mexicans I partake with, I sing a lot. Mm-hmm. I sing a lot, and I sing a lot of Mexican songs, but one song that always gives me hope is Over the Rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow. That movie and that song, to me, when I'm down, they lift me up. So it's not so much about hope, maybe, but it incarnates hope in many ways for me.
It is so hopeful. You know, I remember my daughter Holly, who is now in her mid-30s, when she was a tiny child, she found The Wizard of Oz, and it became the video we had of Wizard of Oz was her movie. And she would watch it over and over and over again, which meant that I had to watch it over and over and over again. And I discovered with a certain amount of joy that The Wizard of Oz is pretty much infinitely rewatchable. You can find something new. There is so much packed into that film. Yeah. And there are so many films, especially films for kids that they make now, where you watch it once and then maybe the second time it's given everything up. There isn't anything more for you. But Wizard of Oz always gives more. And the performances are so glorious. The production design is remarkable, and there's so much in it. And as you say, that idea at the end that it is inside you. You could have gone home all the time, but actually you needed the journey, and you needed to learn the things that you learned on the journey in order to go home.
That's all it is.
But that's so easy. I should have thought of it for you. I should have felt it in my heart.
No, she had to find it out for herself.
Guillermo, thank you so much for talking to me about movies of hope. And I think especially as we all face a pandemic together, it's so good to talk about these themes of hope, of inspiration, solidarity. While COVID-19 has affected us all, it's especially affected refugees. The UN's COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund for the World Health Organization is working to protect the most vulnerable people in the world, including refugees. If you can help, just please make a donation at covid19responsefund.org and share your films of hope with the hashtag Films of Hope. Guillermo, talking to you is such a delight.
I had a blast. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Guillermo.